Hey guys, it's Jaxster. I'm usually the one behind the scenes editing the show. However, this week we thought it'd be real interesting to bring on Dillon from the Hotslogs developing team to have a sit down one on one interview between him and I. We touch on a lot of topics from MMR calculations to overall design philosophies for the site. I hope you'll listen to the entirety of the conversation with an open mind, as we here at NGS feel it's really important to have a complete understanding as to what goes into making placements at the beginning of the season, and Hotslogs plays an integral role in that process. And I would very much appreciate it if you give it a listen and see how it all works. With that said, let's get on to the show. For those that may not be aware of what you do, why don't you introduce yourself and what you do as a member of the Hotslogs crew?
Yeah, sure. My name's Dylan. I am a site producer at Zam Network. I work on a bunch of projects. Clearly, I'm here for Hotslogs. Essentially, what I do is, what Ben used to do when he ran the website. He used to be responsible for, planning features and making sure the site, is working. And I've obviously expanded that a little bit. So I take care of the social media. I take care of finding content for our newsfeed. I take care of planning for the future, managing our development team, that kind of stuff. Essentially, like craft where the website's going, uh, moving forward, and making sure it's running day to day, that kind of stuff.
Very cool, very cool. And how big would you say the crew is? I don't have this in the questions, but how big is the crew?
My team is one of the smaller teams that we have. It's me, a lead developer, and a junior developer, so three people. Essentially, and that's across a few of our projects. I also work on Hearthstone Top Decks and previously worked on Hearthhead.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sam recently, somewhat recently, acquired beginning of the year acquired Hearthstone Top Decks, so we like moved over to that. So we split time. The team splits time between both of the projects right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into the ZAM acquisition in a bit,
Hmm.
because there are a lot of cool and interesting stuff that I want to talk about. But I want to get right into it. The number one most important thing we use here at NGS to assist in placing teams into the appropriate divisions is the Hotslogs MMR stats. Could you tell us a little bit about what goes into making them?
Yeah, sure. So for anyone who's not aware, there's actually a page on the website which is like hotslogs.com/info/MMR information, which talks about it at a very high level. In general, though, it's something that Ben designed. It's similar to like Microsoft's True Skill kind of rating, more than it is, the classic MMR that League and uh, M. Sorry, it's more like True Skill than it is MMR. So, for example, if you're matched against a team with higher MMR than your team and you win, your MMR is going to go up a lot higher than it would if you had a higher MMR than they did, or and in theory that was an easier match than you. Like if you
Yeah,
lose to a team of lesser skill, you're going to lose more MMR than you would otherwise. It's
yeah,
basic stuff there. And then we split up at players by their MMR into different groups. Diamond, platinum, gold, silver, all that stuff. The top 1% is diamond. The next 9% is platinum, gold, and silver. Which each of those are like actually, I should say Master League's
yeah.
1% diamonds, 9%
Hmm.
platinum, gold, silver, or 20% in bronze is like the bottom 30. I think what a lot of people do get confused of is simply the amount of games it takes to get your MMR solidified.
Hmm.
It takes we need at least like 100 matches to have any kind of idea where you might belong. And if you're gaining or losing about 50 points per match, that usually means that we're not exactly sure, where you
Hmm.
should be. So yeah, there's a lot of shifting, and I know a lot of people talk about our definition of leagues and all that kind of stuff, and that's all stuff that we kind of brought over from when Ben was running the site, and it's stuff that we may adjust going forward. But right now, that's how the MMR system works.
Is it about 100, 150 games per game mode? So, like, if you have 10,000 games, for example, in QM, but you've only played 10 games in Hero League, that it would have a really good idea about what your QM MMR is, but, like, it would still have these wild swings if you went into Hero League.
Yeah, exactly. I believe they're completely separate from each other.
Okay. Blizzard has said that they have stopped implementing a soft reset on the MMR, as well as the uncertainty that goes into the beginning of the season. Hotslogs, however, still does I call it a reset. It's a very soft drop of about 200 to 300 points in my case, at the beginning of each season in each game mode. Are there any plans to change this going forward, or do you feel like it's important in the MMR calculations?
Yeah, we actually had a conversation about this back when, obviously Blizzard announced that they were going to do this, and it kind of like snuck up on us, and we were talking about it.
Yeah, they don't call you beforehand to let you know.
Yeah, but we had some conversations about it, and some people wanted it to be as authentic as possible. Other people, were fine with the system as it is. And there was a lot of debate about what we should do. What it came down to currently is, without a soft reset, it's possible for people to just get locked in at their current MMR and like really not be able to move at all. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But considering like Hotslogs MMR system for the most part is, just like a supplemental feature of the site that's kind of just for fun for a lot of people. We didn't want to go down the route of opening up that door and maybe not being able to to close it again,
Mhm.
because if people end up getting locked at like bronze 5 or whatever, and then they're stuck there forever, they're not going to enjoy using uploading game store site and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So like, will we reevaluate in the future? Maybe. I don't think anything with MMR is locked down 100% going forward. Uh, like I said, when Ben designed all this stuff, and us getting a handle on the entire website has been like a monumental task. And the MMR system is kind of like this nebulous cloud floating out there that doesn't directly affect anything, but kind of affects everything. Um, that we really haven't wrapped our hands around yet. So I think at some point in the future we could revisit it, and maybe we do, you know, stop doing soft resets. But for now, we're currently doing it.
Blizzard keeps a closed lid on the exact statistics from the games played, and unfortunately for us, but I guess fortunately for you guys, so they keep a closed lid on the exact statistics from the games played, and has said that releasing an API is not high on the priority list. Amazingly, it's a small indie company. Their matchmaking team is apparently their same web design team. Don't know what's up with that, but until they release an API, Hotslogs is without a doubt the most accurate stat aggregator available. But because you don't have access to all of the games played, do you have any idea how reliable and accurate the numbers are? And to follow up, what percentage of games would you say you have cataloged compared to the total number of games played?
Yeah, I think it's pretty accurate. There was actually just a few months ago, I think it was, where Blizzard shared win rate
Mm-hmm.
data
Yeah, I
from
saw
a
that.
specific patch for supports.
And Critic
Uh,
Kitten
and
did a great
yeah,
analysis.
Yeah, he did a great analysis of it and found that like 61% of our data in that specific set was very accurate, and then like four of them were in the middle 50% of the range. I think only like one was like way off, and that was Deckard Cain,
Mm-hmm. But that he
who
was
had
brand new.
yeah, and he was pretty new. So like overall, it looks like our data is pretty accurate. Like 8 out of 13 supports being very accurate is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Um, and all but one within the acceptable range is great. And I think that goes to show that in general we're pretty accurate. Obviously, we're not like, we don't have Blizzard numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and that they have huge amounts of games that we'll never get that specific. But as long as we get like, I don't want to say within the ballpark because the ballpark's pretty big, but as long as we're somewhat close, I think that's acceptable.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and as far as like how many games we get, I asked Ben about this, and he thinks that we probably get about 25% of all HOTS games right now. It's mostly a wild guess, but he thinks based on how many duplicate games we get, how many one game is uploaded by multiple users,
Mm-hmm.
he thinks that's about 25%.
That's very interesting that you say that. I like to view Hotslogs as more like it's not a direct reflection of what's happening, but it's like polling where it's like you take a random sampling of the player base and their win rates on heroes, and it for the most part translates accurately.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, moving into the more minute details. These are the stuff that I really enjoy. One of the most frustrating things in HOTS might be when you get placed into a game with other people that you might not perceive as an equal skill level. I'm sure a lot of people experience this. How accurate would you say the matchmaker in HOTS is at grouping people of similar skill values or skill levels? And does it differ from one game mode to the other?
Right, yeah, I know a lot of people like to complain about the matchmaker and
Yeah. Again, this
how
isn't directly your wheelhouse, but you have access to a lot more data than we do.
yeah, we actually had Ben pull some numbers after you asked us this. Um, and he pulled like the last 10 days, and we saw that about 83% of games in Hero League specifically have like a less than 5% win rate difference due to matchmaking with uneven MMRs, which is actually pretty good.
Mhm.
Um,
I want to hear the other ones though. I want to hear QM and unranked.
I didn't have him.
Because I do have a theory about this, but
Yeah. I didn't. He wasn't able to pull like the quick match stuff because most of our data is Hero League. He probably could have pulled quick match, but I hadn't asked him for that. I just asked him to get what he could get.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting. But what he did offer was like a specific look at how win rates vary based on how the MMRs compare.
Mhm.
And it looks like most of the games fall between like 100 and 200 somewhere in there within the MMR of each other, about 30% of the games. And it turns out that the win rate of the higher MMR team is about 55%. So that's generally within what Blizzard finds acceptable, because Blizzard usually live between 55 and 45, right? And obviously, as you go down, when you're within 100 points, the win rate's down to like 52%, and when you're within 50 points, it's down to like 50.2. And it's even closer when you go down to like below 10 points. And then the reverse is also true, obviously. Once you get above like 300 MMR points within each other, you get to like almost like a 60% advantage as far as winning. Although that's only like 5% of games that are that high. So that's not a ton of games that end up that unbalanced.
Yeah, that generally follows my findings as well. I'll actually send you the Excel. I have done analysis of a sampling of my games as well, and I've made pretty charts as well. I might include this in the podcast. But just comparing MMRs from Hotslogs and compared to mine and the ranges, what I found is pretty much what you said. Hero League is, believe it or not, I know a lot of people don't like to believe it. Hero League is pretty accurate at matching your personal MMR as the average team MMR of your group. It's pretty accurate. I think I found half the time I was above it, half the time I was below it, which is pretty much just what you want. And my skill level is pretty much the same on all game modes. I think I'm low master on everything. But unranked and QM I found are actually much more inaccurate. I'd like to hear your opinion on that. You don't have to say anything definitive, and if this is a bad question, we can cut it out later.
No, no, I would imagine that to be true. I don't think, especially quick match, especially undrafted, is probably like way out of whack. Just because everyone's just playing whoever they want. But yeah, no, I would imagine it wouldn't be too accurate. I mean, if you expect 55%, a 55% win rate, discrepancy like evenly, regardless of which team you're on. In Hero League, I would imagine that's probably opened up a little bit in quick match, based on just trying to find matches more quickly, because people are mostly just looking to play and people are playing more casually. So I would assume that to be true. I don't think that's preposterous.
Yes. Okay. Any concern about the validity of the Team League MMR statistic, considering the let's call it questionable nature of the matchmaker in its current form? I know we use QM, unranked, Hero League, and Team League MMRs, and we average them together, and that's how we come up with a MMR for a team to put into our divisions. So, do you have any worries about it?
I mean, I share some of the same stuff that the community does, as far as Blizzard making sure that they do that correctly. As far as our data goes, I'm not sure how to speak to it, but yeah, no, I definitely do think that Matchmaker they do have some work to do as far as making sure that stays correct. But the numbers we shared earlier, I know that's Hero League, not Team League, but I would imagine you would see something that's relatively similar, maybe shifted a little bit, just because it's a lot harder, and you can match yourself with teammates and that kind of stuff. So it's a little harder for the client to balance an entire team when you choose who's inside of it, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I don't really know the definitive answer to that question, but those are my general feelings.
Okay. Average team MMR. This is my favorite topic. If you talk to me in voice channels, this is always what I want to bring up. How big of a determining factor is it in matching teams? And how big, and my follow-up question is, how big of an MMR range between the best player on the team and the worst player on the team is too big?
Right. Yeah, I don't know what what's necessarily too big. I think from, like I said, earlier numbers, anything like above 300 generally throws things like off completely. you start getting some really weird results, and at that point, it's like it reminds me of like someone in League. I've played a lot of League before I played
played
HOTS, and if you're like League forbids you if you're a full like league above. So like if you're gold and the person's diamond, you can't really play together because it just throws it off too much. And I can kind of see that happening with some things as far as MMR goes in HOTS. Like I can see that being an issue, especially when you're trying to get teams even and not allowing that one person to just carry the entire team just based on his skill alone. Even the rest of the team is god awful at the game. So yeah, I don't know what the here, I'm just taking a look at the question again. I don't know what the
how big of a factor, like they put a lot of importance on it, is like if two teams are not very close, like they will not match them against each other.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, I think that's the biggest factor for them is the average team MMR more than anything. I do sympathize with Blizzard a little bit if it gets, like I said, that range gets a little too wide. But overall, I think according to these numbers, they do a pretty good job of keeping them within an acceptable range and trying to keep the win rate as close to 50-50 as possible.
I know it was a big problem for Team League that we used to, new players might not remember, but we used to have a limit on in Team League who could play together, or I think it was similar to what League had of you could not play if you were too far away, and they removed that in like a very small like comment of a blue post. They removed that. I'm interested to hear your opinions on why. I personally have just always assumed it's because the player base was not big enough for Team League, and that's why they did it. But like, how big of a factor is it? Like, that seems like a pretty negative change in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think player base probably had something to do with it. Especially, it's also I don't want to upset Heroes fans, but it is a more casual MOBA than the other two options out there, right? And I think that also is part of it. But yeah, no, it's definitely a combination of those two. I would lean more towards it just being because HOTS is a more casual game, more so than the player size pool. Although that definitely could have had something to do with it.
Okay. Yeah, moving on. Here's one that the community will like. Overpowered and underpowered are words that get thrown around a lot following new heroes or massive changes like Raynor rework. A lot of calls for just today to get him nerfed, often accompanied by data from Hotslogs to back up the views. How much importance do you think people should put on one number? I know these numbers are very reflective of what is happening in the game, but how much value should we put on one number? And do you think it's a reinforcing behavior, like more because he has a higher win rate, more like higher tier players will play them, and the win rate goes up further? And if a hero is lower in the win rates, like not a lot of people will play them.
Yeah, so there's a few parts of that question. I definitely think there are good times to use the data, like Phoenix and Maiev when they first launched, and you could see how astronomically far ahead they were of everyone else. But there are definitely situations where you can't just look at the data at face value. There's obviously there's the super obvious examples of like Proteus had the highest win rate for a while, but that's only because we only had like 1,000 games for him compared to like 30,000 of other people. And outside of that, there's a lot of times where like a few percentage points like really don't matter to as far as like the big picture goes, like 55 to 57%. Like yeah, it's a little over the line, but whatever. That the error range could actually put it under 55%. Like that could be perfectly fine. So there's a lot of people out there that don't understand the intricacies of data, that don't know of all the holes that you can fall into when looking at it. Because there's a lot of different ways to slice the data in your favor, right? Like you can make an argument, any argument you want, if you just look at the data in the correct way. But what you really need to do is look at the data that ruins your argument, and that's like part of the response. That's the responsible way to do these things. And I think there's a few people that use Hotslogs for their data set that do this, and that write about it pretty regularly. And as far as if you want, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I mean it's Critic Kitten. I mean he does a fantastic write up. Like everybody should. I'll drive site traffic away from my site and like go check him out on Heroes Hearth. He's a great guy, and he does a really good write up.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to say it doesn't influence people. It definitely influences everyone, especially people that are super casual. Like when I was casually playing HOTS, I would literally just log in, see what my dailies are. All right, I have specialists. Who has the highest win rate on Hotslogs? Okay, it's this person compared to the popularity. Is that like, is that okay? And then you would pick and choose based off that, and then you would go in and you would literally just choose the highest win rate, most popular talents in order, and not even care if it made a complete build. Like casual people are really influenced by the stats that are displayed on these websites. So that's one issue as far as all that stuff. Um, but yeah, was there a second part of the question? I can't remember.
Oh,
So I'm sorry.
having to do with, is it a reinforcing behavior? So take example Raynor right now. So like Raynor
Mhm.
is the hotness. Okay, everybody's playing Raynor. Everybody is playing. So do you think that is a reinforcing behavior where like better players are like, well, I guess Raynor seems really good right now, and so they play them, and because they are better players, quote unquote, than the average, the win rate of the hero is going to go up, not necessarily because let me be clear, Raynor is pretty decent right now, but is his win rate more driven by the player base being better at him, or is it driven more by the hero being good?
Right. So you're saying like if our site says Raynar is good, and then all the low level players see he's good, and then they start playing him and driving the win rate down,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff, or the opposite's true if
I
you
mean,
don't. Correct stuff.
Urel is probably the best example for this. So Urel launched with I don't know, 39% win rate on
Uh,
Hotslogs,
oh yeah, it was awful.
and so like everybody was just dismissing her and just saying she was horrible. She got some buffs, but they weren't like monumental. Her E got buffed very well, and her D got buffed, but like that was not enough to make her win rate jump. What is it, 14 points?
Yeah, no, I think that was definitely a situation of everyone's playing her and they don't know how to play her, so the win rate's pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty common across MOBAs. Is when people first launch, that oftentimes they tank until people figure out the best way to actually play them, or until the high level players figure out how to do it, and then it slowly rises.
Yeah.
And I think the opposite could also be true, that uh, someone's super popular and because of that the win rate's driven down. Although I think that's a lot harder to identify, because most of the time that's going to be like, oh, someone should have like a 60% win rate, but they actually have like a 54 or 55, and that's not super noticeable. Whereas someone who's down in the 40 or someone who's up in the 70s is like super super obvious.
Yeah, yeah. It's just I always feel it's something to keep in mind when you see these heroes that maybe are a little too good or a little too bad. Like maybe it's not all being driven by how good the hero is, and we see the snapping of, oh, Blizzard says like, oh, these numbers they look really bad, so they hit somebody with a nerf like really heavy handed, and then they're just into oblivion.
Yeah, but there's a reason we're not the people balancing, and the
Yes.
community is the people balancing. It's because
Yeah,
we don't
yeah.
have the full data set.
I trust in Blizzard. Let's move on to talking more broadly about the site. What changes do you have planned for the future? And I have some things, but I'll let you go first.
All right, sure. Yeah, there's a lot that we're working on, a lot that we're planning. A quick disclaimer is that development takes a long time, and
What?
it always takes
Oh,
longer than you think
that's
it will.
crazy.
All right. We actually touched on some of this recently in our monthly newsletter that we published like last week, I think. It's on our site in the news section, and we posted on Reddit,
I'll put a
where
link.
yeah, where we talk about it. I'll send you it after the podcast. Um, where we talk about these things, stuff that we're working on. I'm a little vague in this one just because there's a lot that's going on. But one of the recent things that looks like we're about to finish up is, so we launched a talent calculator a few months ago, and we had plans to make it unique, or well, more unique, and provide things like data, and tie it into the Hotslogs, you know, the, the the feeling of the site as a whole, which kind of got delayed with a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the last few months. But we're close to getting that out, and then that'll actually have some data behind it, so you can go in there and try builds and see how that affects the numbers and stuff like that. Um, we're also working on recoding a lot of the pages. Like I said, we acquired Hotslogs not that long ago, and it was Ben's pet project, and it was built for one person, not for a team to work in. So there were a lot of things that we need to go into and fix and recode and do all that kind of stuff. And it's not glorious, but if we want to invest in the site in the future, and speed up development times and make it so that the site performs better and all that stuff, we have to do the grunt work and the legwork now to get it to a place where we can actually keep building things. Um, So we're starting that process now and doing a lot of that stuff, and working on redesigning some of the pages and adding new features and all that stuff. It's like we're until we do this, like for example, we're tackling the front page right now. We're revisiting a lot of the stuff on there and making sure we can work in it in the future. So we're redesigning some things on there and implementing some new features and that kind of stuff. So that's all the stuff that's like in the immediate future, probably towards the end of this quarter, end of the year, that kind of stuff. That's what we're working for the next 6 months. That's our goal.
Awesome. Can't wait. I have some stuff that I'll be asking about the site. We can go through it like a lightning round. First, post level 20 on heroes tracking. Is this Blizzard? Can I just blame Blizzard? I think this is Blizzard's fault.
You can actually blame Blizzard for that one. Yeah. Turns out that when Blizzard switched to Heroes 2.0, they never updated the field in the replays that tracks your hero level. Like as far as it's concerned, the max hero level is 20, which is what it used to be. So the good news is that when we released our first monthly newsletter about 2-3 months ago, someone for Blizz actually saw that was the thing that they were blocking everyone on, and they made a note that they filed a ticket for that. So maybe someday we'll get it
soon.
Blizzard soon, maybe. Yeah.
Different talents, but named the same, having the same icon. So I'm looking at Redemption on Hanzo and Uther. So for the longest time, Hanzo's level 1 just has this yellow paladin on it for Redemption. Any thoughts on getting the? I'm not sure what it is. I imagine that's a coding problem of it's
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably that. There's a lot of weird things that can happen that a lot of us, unless you're like super into the data, you won't even notice, unless you're looking at those pages like every single day. Like recently we had actually it was Critic Kitten who was like, hey, I'm looking at the past like 7 weeks of data for Zeratul, and like on his level 20 he has 2 gifted the Zelnagas, and I'm not sure why. You might want to look into that. And like we dug into it and found out that like an update that we did a few weeks ago to make our process faster as far as updating the site changed the apostrophe from like the regular apostrophe to like a curved apostrophe or the other way around. I don't know. There's 2 different apostrophes in your keyboard. I don't know the name for them, but that switched and it caused the database to identify them as 2 separate talents. So there's a lot of weird things that happen when you're dealing with so much data.
This is why I'm not a coder.
Yeah. So yeah, we deal with that stuff as people report it. I actually was not aware of exactly what you're saying, but I'll look into it after.
Oh yeah. So if you look on hero details and you look at talent choices, for talents that are named the same, like Redemption, Uther has its level 20 Redemption that lets him respawn after he dies. The talent picture icon that goes with it is a yellow paladin on it, and on Hanzo he has a talent named Redemption. And it is far different from Uther's Redemption, but it has the same icon, and that's the same for pretty much every talent that is the same that are named the same. There are a couple other examples, but that's the most prominent one. Is there any thought to having an option to look at just what Blizzard uses to balance? I believe it was a few months ago that they spilled the beans and said they use Hero League Diamond and up, and you have to have a hero level of 10 at least, and that is what they use to balance.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're redesigning a lot of stuff, and I think the front page redesign, we have some things in the work that will serve as sort of like a band-aid for this problem. Obviously, our hero details, our hero map and statistics page, I believe it's called, has a bunch of filters that you can use, but they're a little bit unwieldy, and sometimes they don't work depending on what you select. But we have a band-aid in plan for like a quick toggle for one of the features that we're working on that will default to that, so you can at least see what the top heroes look like at that level.
Yeah, I guess I could skip ahead to my next question, which is, when you go to the site, the first thing you see is not the news tab or the welcome page. Like on Lol King, for example, which is another Zam-owned property. You go there and you get a big news. Here's what's happening in League, tournaments happening. If you go to Hotslogs, it shows you all Hero League games of the past 7 days. I know this was just since in time immemorial when Ben originally set this up. Is this a conscious decision to keep it this way? And do you think it's the most accurate representation of what's going on in the league?
Right. So yeah, it wasn't we made a decision to keep it that way when we got the site, just because people were used to that being the way it is. And we were doing our quick design updates, with the color scheme and all that stuff, and a little bit of the design touches. We talked about maybe changing the front page, but at that point, Hotslogs was in a pretty fragile place, with the community. I think we'll get into this in a little bit, but there's between everything that was happening, and a lot of people don't like change. So in general, we're very, very careful with that kind of stuff. And since we were only making quick changes, I didn't want to make such a sweeping change until we could commit to making it right if we made the wrong step. But yeah, so I mean, folks like it that way just because they want to get their info as quick as possible and get a quick snapshot of what the meta looks like at any given time. I don't blame them for that, and that's what it is. I don't think we'll ever completely do away with it. As far as like why it's there, we'll shift things around when we start updating things and redesigning things. And as far as like if it's the most accurate representation, do you mean in regards to Blizzard sense, or do you mean in regards to like the community?
Well, yeah, and I mean more in terms of just the community in general, because it doesn't take into account this as compared to what I was previously talking about. Blizzard uses to balance diamond and up players only in Hero League, and they have to be hero level 10. So if you look at the front page, you get people who are very new on heroes.
Right.
You get people who are from all walks of life. So it's more bent towards the bronze Hero League because there are more bronze Hero League games happening than Diamond or Master or Grandmaster. So, like, for example, I mean, Gazlo is, I think he's like 5th or 6th right now on the Hotslogs page. And, is that a good sign, when people go there and say, oh, Gazlo looks like he's like one of the best heroes in the game right now, when in actuality, he just has really high playability at lower levels.
Right. I think that what we have is probably a happy medium, because on one end we could display the quick match stuff, so we just display the maximum amount of data as possible. Because I would assume that might be the largest, although it might be a little skewed just because Hotslogs tends to go towards more hardcore players. And the opposite would be to only display what Blizzard says, which is a very narrow picture, which might not be accurate towards people that are bronze and silver that aren't that skilled at those characters. So yeah, I would say like as a whole, it's probably the best default. Although we could definitely do a better job of giving people options to display the data they want more quickly.
Yeah, I'd be definitely looking forward to that. Any thoughts on removing old talent or older iterations of talents that exist now? So if you go to the hero details page on your profile in Hotslogs, it will tell you, like, for Toronto, like, you see, like, Shrink Ray. Like, I used to play a lot of Shrink Ray, Protective Shield, Sprint, stuff like that. But it's kind of like it's cluttering it up, so it seems like there's like 7 or 8 talent choices per level. Any thoughts on removing that, or at least adding like an option to remove that?
So I assume you're like looking back multiple patches or like all time or something, and that's why it's displaying so many.
It should. So yeah, so you go to your profile and you go to hero statistics and you just go for like the
On
arrow that puts all the options off. So
Right,
like on
right.
Johanna, I see Knight Takes Pawn, and it's like, oh, we don't have Knight Takes Pawn anymore. We don't have Regen Master anymore.
Okay, yeah, I actually wasn't aware like there's a lot on Hotslogs, and there's a lot we're still trying to understand, and obviously I'm working across multiple sites. But yeah, that's definitely something that I can look into and talk to them about, because yeah, that makes sense. I don't know why we would display anything other than what's current. Because like it doesn't really make sense to tell you, oh, by the way, 2 years ago when Genji had this, Genji wasn't around 2 years ago, I don't think. But anyway, when
2 years ago, I have Righteous Smash. I've picked it 5 times. I have a 60% win rate on it. Like, I don't
exactly,
need to know
that's not useful. That's not useful for anyone. So we can probably get into that stuff when we start talking about visiting profiles and that kind of stuff, because profiles are on our list of things to hit, specifically the main page, just because we want people to feel more engaged in match history, because it takes forever to load.
Any thoughts on expanding? This is actually something I came up with earlier today because I wanted to look at Kane win rates for Lornado versus Stay a While and Listen at pro level, and I thought, why doesn't Hotslogs have that? Any thoughts on expanding into organizing pro stats?
Not on our radar right now, I'll say that much. Obviously Master League does a great job at what they do, particularly since I think they got taken over by, was it Team Liquid? I don't know, whoever.
something like that.
Since they've been really active and really keeping up with that kind of stuff, and I think they do a great job. And like, if Master League ever went away, I think there might be some, reason for us to get into it. Like, I know that the owner was talking about, how he couldn't afford to keep it running, all that kind of stuff, or didn't have the time. I don't remember what the exact reasoning was, but like, if that had gone away, maybe there was an argument that maybe we start doing that. But as long as it's there, I don't see the necessity of it. I know it'd be great for people, but that's a pretty big task.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like a whole another data set. I know we have. I'll plug myself here. We have Stats of the Storm, which is a one-man show put on by our Falendrith, who made a site that you can input stats from both NGS seasons and from HGC games, and you can look at it from there. But he has to continuously manually upload them. So I was just wondering if we were gonna have any alternative.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Props to them for doing it.
He is great. Everybody go check him out. I made a tutorial video and everything. Moving into the controversy time. Are you ready?
Oh God, right. Sure.
Let's do this. We'll start off with an easier one. In the business of stat aggregation, data is king. The more data you have, the more accurate the site. With that said, I'd like to hear your opinion on the HOTS API. Do you view it as a competitor or as an additional form of receiving game data, as they have an option to upload to Hotslogs as well? Would you feel comfortable uploading there as an alternative to your own uploader?
Right. So the whole HOTS API situation is a little weird. Obviously, that kind of arose during the people hate Hotslogs phase, when people were trying to find alternative options, and some people are still trying to do that, and that's fair game. But it's a little weird because they're like not a direct competitor in that they're just an API, right? They don't have a competing website. They just allow other people to make websites, which may be competitors to us. So it's like that weird gray area. If we do use their data, there's an option in HOTS API to upload to us as well, which is great. We appreciate that. And we have no user issue with people using API over our uploader or whatever. You can do whatever you want. And as far as like directly promoting their uploader as an alternative, we don't have a huge problem with that. Like recently in our last month's newsletter, again, at the bottom, we just thanked anyone for uploading through either HOTS API or our own uploader. We link both. We're perfectly fine with that. As far as like constantly promoting it, clearly we're going to constantly promote our own uploader just because.
It makes sense. That makes complete sense. I mean, it is. I mean, we are moving into the controversy time. It is always very interesting getting into conversations with people, and I know on my team, for instance, I'm going to call out one of my players who, when we first met about stats on different players, and I would always bring up Hotslogs stats, and he would bring up a random other site, and I would always have to come back to the fact that, like, however much you dislike Hotslogs, you have to give them credit because they have the largest stockpile of stats. Like, it's not even a question. I think the most recent uploads is 131 million to Hotslogs and like 9 million to HOTS API. So if you are looking for the most accurate stats, you have to go to Hotslogs. Like, that's no question. You're going to get, I've seen it, you are going to get crazy things like Cho'Gall having a 90% win rate on Team League on other sites because it doesn't have that big of a sample size.
Yeah, absolutely. They're even with our huge sample size, there's still like times when minor data like completely skews things, even with that many games, which is still crazy. Like, you need a massive amount of games to avoid huge error margins. And it's really rough.
And if you are using these sites as arguments in terms of like polls, like it's polling the community, a smaller sample size is never what you want. It's going to lead to crazy outcomes, and it's going to mislead you into thinking that maybe some heroes are better than they are, or some talent choices are better than they are.
Right. Yeah, and I gotta give credit to like people like I don't know if you ever used the complete HOTS Google Play or Apple app.
Oh yeah.
But they use our API to pull like 30 days worth of game data. and they use that, and that's like a good alternative too. If you don't want to like, obviously it's not like live updating. It's not as, it's not going to be as up to date as our data, but it might actually be more accurate overall than a much smaller sample size, especially when it comes to like the smaller things, like you talked about.
Yeah. Until Blizzard releases an API with all of the results, or HOTS API becomes bigger, I think it's just a fact that Hotslogs will probably be the best choice. With that said, let's move into the probably the most controversial topic, and probably what everyone listening will probably be waiting for. Ads. So I will be upfront. I am a premium member. I have been for over a year. I think it was like March of last year that I joined. I think it's a great deal personally. But I feel like I know people who would just be like, I don't use it. I use it pretty much daily, so I get a lot of value out of it. But I know some people who just go on, from time to time. So $10, that's not really feasible for them. So I like all of the cool features, exporting stats, showing up on the leaderboards as top 100, and turning off ads, most importantly. Before we dive in, I'll give my personal experience. So my personal background as an unbiased third party. I started using Hotslogs shortly after launch back in 2015. It was, back then, people forget, but it was the only site. It was the only site to have these stats. No other HOTS API wasn't around. Ben built this site by himself, and it was so crucial to helping me improve personally as a player, and so many others. With that said, there was the case of the ads. Others claim to have had sound intrusive or malicious ads. I can't say that I ever experienced those. Personally, I can't really say that I experienced worse ads than what you see normally on like Google AdSense. But the big thing that I experienced was it made the site extremely difficult to use with how slow it would get. So back then, I used an ad block for some programs. I no longer use it. I use Mozilla Firefox, and they have the tracking protection, so I just use that. And the difference with and without it on would be like a 1 second load time to a 10-second load time. And when you're going into a game and you need like a quick stat, I haven't played URL yet, I need to know what her talents are. I can't be waiting for that long. So I found myself blocking them, not because I dislike seeing the ads or because they were intrusive, but because it was just unfeasible. I would not be able to look at the stats fast enough. When the ad block blocking came into effect, I switched back, and the very slow refresh rate I dealt with for a little while, but I switched to premium, and I've been there ever since. So I'm pretty much in the center on everything on this issue. I was not a part of the lynching mobs on Reddit, which I think that's a fair description of them. I can understand why people might be upset being forced into a unfriendly or possibly unsafe experience. On the other hand, it's hard to see the difference between that and a service like Spotify, which constantly interrupts you with your listening experience with like obnoxious ads. So, and on top of this is all compounded by the fact that Hotslogs for the longest time has had a monopoly on information, which is good in the sense of they have a lot of information and they're very accurate. Bad in the sense of you don't have a lot of competition to improve, which has changed now with HOTS API, which I'm glad. Competition is always great. But even today, the ratio of games uploaded to Hotslogs versus HOTS API is like a 14-to-1 ratio. So it's still a pretty big difference. So with all that said, I'm out of breath. I will let you take it from here. You have a sizable minority of players still upset and frustrated. What can you say to them to try and convince them to come back to using Hotslogs? And what improvements have you made and are looking to make in the future to the way advertisers interact with users on the site?
Yeah, sure. That was a lot.
I'm gonna take a drink of water now.
No, just go for it. So like I'll give some like background on this. So when we announced that we acquired Hotslogs, right?
Did you know of the Hubaloo before
Oh
you
yeah,
announced it? Okay.
yeah. I mean, I've only been I'm like a casual Heroes of the Storm player. I'm like ranked 200, 250, something like that.
So were you in the Reddits when everything went down?
Yeah, but I've been following the Heroes of the Storm subreddit since like beta.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's actually what I played most. I used to play like daily back in the beta and alpha days. But yeah, I followed along the whole thing, and like we get super frustrated with everything that was happening because I was one of the people who would open up Hotslogs on and went to play, and while I was playing, an audio ad would play, and then would have to like alt tab, for like find a moment to alt tab, go out alt tab, and like hit back, and then when it was my next time, I hit talent, go forward, and then pick my talent, and then back out, so the like an ad didn't autoplay like 5 minutes later or whatever.
And you have like a 10-second wait time, like because it's so slow.
Yeah. So like I've been there. Like that's how I felt, like last year, when like all this was super happening. And then we announced we acquired Hotslogs. I think it was in January. And we immediately made some changes, switched ad networks, did a bunch of stuff, and talked about how we improved the ad situation. And I think that's everyone knows that's true. The number of complaints as far as Hotslogs goes, according to Ben, has like 10% of what it used to be. Like it's gone down. I'm pulling that number, out of nowhere, out of the air. But like he's explained to us, like he used to get daily complaints about ads and stuff, and now it's nowhere near that frequent. And even on Reddit, we used to, people, there would be daily threads all the time, and you just don't see that anymore, which has to mean like it's gotten better. That said, there's a lot of things that are that affect these things. Like you mentioned, the long load times, and yes, ads can be part of that. It could also just be a part of, like I said, this was a one-man project, so it might not be optimized as well as it could be. There's a lot of data going on, like with match history, like that's a lot of games to load. I think by default, currently it loads 2,000 games worth of data, which is a lot of data, and takes a decent amount of time to get that up quickly. Which is all stuff that we're going to address and try to fix. And not all of it is like squarely placed on the ads, and I think there was a lot of things going on there. There's that infamous this is everything wrong with Hotslogs, and it's like it was the YouTube video where the guy just showed the amount of requests, and I mean it's relatively, like, if you look at it now, Hotslogs is pretty standard. If you look at it, the amount of requests any site has, it's in 200 to 300 around there, and I think we have a similar amount now, and it's obviously whatever they were experiencing was a little preposterous. I don't know what was causing that exactly, but I think our recoding projects should help. I think us changing ad networks definitely helped. Recently, like a few weeks ago, we switched. The way we had it before was the side banner was 2 ads or 1 giant banner ad. We switched it to just 1 ad and like this little featured articles thing, which actually promotes the news section of the site, which wasn't getting a lot of traffic. And from time to time it'll play a muted video ad, and the issue rate with that thing is way lower than an average ad. So we're doing things like that to try to reduce, be more user friendly with our ads, and make sure that people aren't experiencing autoplay ads, that aren't experiencing redirect ads, that aren't experiencing like pop-up ads that take over the browser or any of that kind of stuff.
Okay. I think that's really a laudable goal. I know there are going to be a lot of people, I assume, listening to this right now that are probably still fuming with anger. So do you think this is something that you will just overcome through sheer time? It'll just be like a Half-Life situation of people just will eventually just forget about it, or will move on? I hope, at least, probably.
I mean, I think it'll always be part of the Heroes community at this point, because it was like such
legend.
an infamous event, right? Personally, of course, I have to hope that people get over it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they necessarily will. All we can do is keep being better and doing better things. And I think like we've done a lot of stuff, and I'd rather not tell them that we're never gonna have any issues. I'd rather show them that we're making strides, and I think we definitely have been. I mean, we've been working with Heroes Hearth and Complete Hots and Not Paradox, and doing a whole bunch of being more active in the community essentially. And we're working hard to make sure that this stuff comes to light sooner rather than later. Historically, Hotslogs has had a later rather than later problem, and that's not acceptable. Silence isn't a good thing, so we're trying to remedy that. And yeah, we hope that the community will give us time to make sure this is all right, because us recoding certain parts of the site and doing all this behind the scenes work is trusting in the fact that the community support is still going to be there, and hopefully it gets to a point where people not only use us because they have to and that we're the only source, but because they want to, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's all anybody can ask is just to try to just improve constantly. I think that's all we can ask. I would recommend, if I were you guys, I would recommend doing what you're doing right now, and working to do outreach, to be active in the community, because if anything, silence is easy, but it's not going to help, and it's only going to like fester opinions. I mean, we see this in like every day of life. We see it in like companies, and we see it with like politics. It's just like it's better to be open and to be transparent with your community than it is to close yourself off, because it kind of gives you the moral high ground, and there will always be those people who just have a moral objection to you, but those will be fewer and far between, and I think you'll gain a lot more support that way. So more active on like the Reddit, even if that's going into the lion's den, stuff like this on the podcast. I will probably post this onto the Reddit as a separate post, just to say, here's us talking about it. I think it's pretty candid conversation. I mean, throw all your hate if you want into the comments, but they're working on getting better. That's pretty evident, and they want to improve their community outreach.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, like there was a long time where my morning always consisted of going to the subreddit and searching for every mention of Hotslogs in the last 24 hours.
Don't do that.
And I did that a lot when we first took over, to just engage with people, to make sure that they knew that it wasn't just because for the long time people would just be like, oh, Ben's this, Ben's that, and I'm like, well, Ben isn't, we acquired the project from him. He's not the person leading it right now, and that we're going to change these things. And I think we've finally got that out there, that we are working to change these things. I think people have noticed that things are changing, and hopefully that's something that we can continue to communicate with people. And like I said, we're trying to work more with different people in the community, and we have a bunch of stuff that we're working on behind the scenes that will hopefully come out around the end of the quarter or towards Q4. There's so much that we want to do, and there's so much that Heroes of the Storm needs that we can potentially offer with the resources that we have. We just got to get the site to a point where we can actually do what we want to do.
Absolutely. I wish you the best of luck. I want to thank you once again for scheduling this meeting, or this interview with us. It's great to talk to you guys, answer a lot of my pet questions that I've had over the years, and I think it'll do a lot for you guys as well. Is there anything else that you want to mention before I let you go?
Not a ton. Thanks for inviting me on, because there's a lot of stuff that we talked about today that you really can't say in writing, because people misconstrue things or misread things, and it's really hard to talk about all this stuff without just being able to talk, right?
Yeah. I'm sure they'll take our words out of context, regardless. So.
Oh, maybe. But yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for everyone who continues to support Hotslogs and has and continues to upload replays, because we could not have the site or even run the site or even think about improving the site unless people did, because it's pretty much the only reason people do come to our site, between profiles and our gathered data. So thanks to everyone for that. We really do hope to continue to be able to do it for years and years as HOTS continues to evolve.
Absolutely, that sounds fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think I use it every day, and I would fully endorse it as the best site to go. If you get my Jaxster stamp of approval. I know it goes goes really far. Well, I'll let you go. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you once again for coming on to do this. It was fantastic.
No problem. Thanks.